When you come to this book, think feminism, think political gains, think religious cult, terrorism, epidemic, wars, violence, and science fiction. That's how crazy it is. It's just completely out there, but also very interesting and exciting. However, the execution for me didn't really do it. Won the Women's Bailey's Prize for Fiction, and this is my review. So stay tuned if you want to know what I think about this book. The basic premise of this book is what happens when society is turned over its head and women ultimately are in power, or women have more control over men. The entire story revolves around this central theme, and this happens quite cleverly, really. I think the concept of this whole book is very, very interesting and totally intriguing. The bulk of the story is made up from these women who serendipitously discover that with a flick of a hand, women are able to paralyze men through an electrical sort of power and even shock people to death. And so, as you can imagine, that is a very sort of powerful thing to have, to use, the word power. The start of the book is really us trying to get to know the characters. It introduces you to several different characters. It's mostly narrated, even though in third person, from 4 points of view. We have Tunde, who's Nigerian, we have Margot, who's American, we have Roxy, I think she's British, and then we also have Ali. And they all obviously come from very different backgrounds and trying to navigate the world in very different ways. There is a journalist, there's a politician, there is a gangster, so that's pretty exciting. Ali, who becomes a religious cult figure. The bulk of the book is made up of documenting the atrocities that are happening worldwide because of this power that has suddenly occurred. And we have places like Saudi Arabia, which are completely turned over their heads. Women now rule and men are not allowed to drive and all those things. It's just very much trying to counter all those social norms and using women as, drives of everything that is currently happening in the world today. Another sort of central theme is violence. And with that, you have the sort of dark corners of violence. Rape, interestingly as well, becomes a salient part of the narrative of the book. The reader, at the same time as the characters in the book, experience the havoc that this power ultimately brings to this world. The world is very similar to our world. You have talk of social media, iPhones, YouTube, and all of that stuff. And so I think that's what makes the narrative really quite engaging at some level. It must be said as well that violence is ultimately used as a tool for social change. With that, I think the author is trying to show how violence is ultimately almost always used to be able to control societies and also write history time and time again. And if you look at the book from that point of view, you can understand why there is so much violence within it, because this is kind of, in a sense, a revolution. This happens, it's obviously disturbs the equilibrium of the world because men find themselves suffering from everything that you can think of that women suffer from, self-confidence issues, to, even issues that are much, much bigger and wider than what they are in terms of influencing social change. There are also some significant relationships that are formed between certain characters within this book, both platonic as well as romantic relationships. And I think that is a nice way to sort of just bring everything together within the book, and I guess maybe also bring some sort of closure because they all meet up at the end of the book. All those things put together sound, really exciting and interesting, and I think for me that's really what kept me reading this book. The fact that it just imagines something so left, so completely random, but could be entirely possible, especially that it's set into this world, has sort of magical and science fiction elements to it. However, for me, I didn't really enjoy this book. I got to the end of it feeling slightly disappointed. In fact, throughout the whole book, I just completely struggled to get through it. And it's not because it's a particularly difficult book to read. I just found it a little bit choppy in parts, and also some things were just totally and completely far-fetched. I didn't really feel like the characters really were well-rounded, bar a couple. I think Roxy and Ali were fantastically written. They were really characters that showed great, sort of character progression. I could understand, I guess, their dilemmas and how they felt about what they were dealing with, and that sort of made me a little bit more sympathetic towards them. You had the character like Margot, who is supposed to be cast as some sort of, you've seen House of Cards, then you will sort of, the sort of vibe that this book was going for in terms of the politician. And I think it kind of got carried away with that sort of narrative in a way and left our character Margot behind. Another thing that this book does is that it gives you a sort of worldwide perspective of how all of this social change is affecting the world. And so we hear from Tunde, who's Nigerian, we have whatever was happening in America, and a place called Moldova. That was, I think, a great way to give you an overview of how it affected the world. But I think in a way it didn't really clarify certain things. In a way, I felt like it was trying to be too ambitious by trying to constantly hold all these different storylines, as well as give you a full idea of what each character was like. So in a sense, it was trying to over-accomplish. I think if maybe it stuck with one part of the world and really delved into the different characters' personalities and then looked at how it was affecting the society, that might have worked for me, and I think that would have been, a great way for me to really bond with the book. One thing that I thought was extremely far-fetched about this book was the different parts of the world. Everybody was slightly mad with this power. Every single woman who had this power was sort of driven to violence and to sort of devious ambitions, like setting up a cult religion because of the power that they had, or just trying to get revenge on men for what they had been doing to them for years and years. Whilst this is true for certain societies, I don't necessarily think that all the women in the world are going to be drawn toward rising to the top and being the most powerful, or trying to use their power for devious gains. So I think, in a sense, it kind of let you down by giving you a worldwide view, but then also making it out as though the whole world respond in exactly the same way. So I think I would have liked the book to give you a more sort of nuanced view of how different women would use this power. You did, however, get the sense that different women had varying degrees of the power, which I guess sort of mirrors how different people are within society. I also mentioned in my Instagram post how I saw so many parallels between this book and Game of Thrones Cersei. And if you guys watch Game of Thrones, then you'll know, mostly because of the violence that was depicted in this book. And I felt as though the characters narrating, especially say Roxy, I saw so many parallels between her and Cersei, because ultimately I feel as though Cersei is trying to prove that she is a woman who is in control and who's as capable of doing everything that men are capable of doing. So in a sense, she has that sort of chip on her shoulder where she has something to prove in a male-dominated world. Luckily for one of our characters in this book, whilst she has got that sort of drive to prove something, she also has the advantage of being, I guess, the dominant sex. And so she uses that to complete full advantage and does certain things that some might consider selfish and completely and utterly brutal. However, it is, I guess, in a way to prove that women are completely capable. It takes a sort of violent spin on all of that. There were so many different exciting elements that could have gone so many different ways. There was the political side of things, there was multiculturalism, there was the dimension of it being a historical fiction sort of read, and yeah, I thought all those things were very exciting elements. However, put together in 300 pages was slightly too much. It's also an important book for men to read in terms of really trying to understand how women can sometimes be affected psychologically by men trying to just exercise their male privilege, I guess. It really shows quite graphically, but also quite well, how this can be a way of socially putting women down. I thought this book would be great as a play or as a TV show, just because of the sheer amount that's going on in it, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was to be picked up as that, because there is a lot there to run with. I know what you think about the whole Game of Thrones Cersei and Roxy parallels that I make. I'm not sure if you guys agree or disagree with them, but let me know what you think down below. I would give this book a 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was okay. Execution wise, not so great. But however, that might just mean it's not my cup of tea. Anyway guys, I feel like I've rambled on for quite a while now. Let's have a conversation. I know I am not great with keeping up with BookTube, but I'm definitely very active on my Instagram, which I use almost on a daily basis. So yeah, find me on there. I'm also trying to organize my Goodreads. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Thanks to the new subscribers as well. Subscribe, comment, like, and share this video.